Way to go, Tic Tac!
That's how you punch.
Wakanda forever!
You wouldn't have heard of me.
Let me put you on hold.
Dance off, bro! He's a friend from work!
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we are going over and ranking Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Captain America: The Winter Soldier, released in 2014, directed by Anthony Russo and Joe Russo. As Steve Rogers struggles to embrace his role in the modern world, he teams up with a fellow Avenger and S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Black Widow, to battle a new threat from history, an assassin known as the Winter Soldier. So I love this movie, and it's been so long since I watched it, so I was so excited to be able to review it now and watch it again because it is amazing. I love this movie. It is done really, really well. There's not many things I can even nitpick about this movie to really crap on it much. So without further ado, let's just get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. So there's a few things I really like about this plot. One of them is how the theme is woven through it in a way where every scene kind of hints at that theme, but many different sides of that same coin. So the theme of this movie is trust, and seeing how all these different characters deal with that specific thought is very interesting, and it adds a lot of depth to the characters as well. And another thing I really like about the story is obviously Captain America, Steve Rogers, is a man of history. He was frozen in time, woke up in the future, and now he has to deal with it and live in that way. So obviously this isn't an origin story. We already reviewed that, and that itself was how Captain America was made. This one was a different kind of origin story of how he is figuring out a way to live normally in this new world. And I just think that concept on its own makes the story really interesting, especially now that you're bringing up Bucky, for example, a man from his past where he never expected to be able to see them again, is back in the present, and it adds all these different layers and depth. So I have to say the plot, one of my favorites for MCU movies. The second essential aspect is attraction. So obviously this is a superhero movie. It's a Captain America movie. It is entertaining action-wise. It's got that checked off. Even comedy-wise, it doesn't need it because this movie is more of a serious toned movie. But all those little jokes and little perfect moments that it had that added a little bit of comedy was just the icing on top. That's honestly the best way I could describe it. It wasn't needed, but because it was there, it made it even better. And the concept, again, just like I was talking about the plot, concept's really interesting to me. I love Captain America's story, and all of his movies, I think, have a really good concept to them, which make the viewing experience even better. So I have to say attraction, this movie definitely has checked off. The third essential aspect is theme. So the message, the truth, the theme of this movie that they're trying to convey to the audience is trust. That's really the simplest one, is trust. It talks about it all the time in the movie. Many different scenes are mentioned by it. And honestly, the plot without this specific theme wouldn't be as interesting, as engaging. It wouldn't be a story that you'd really want to sit down and really pay attention to, because that concept of trust is such an important one in so many people's lives, which is why it's such a heavy concept to bring in a movie, because you have to do it right. Now, this movie definitely did it right. The way that they showed it with S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra, and just Steve not being able to trust anyone because now he doesn't know who to trust, it brings up these new conversations and new feelings in him that he never had to really deal with, because he was part of the army where everyone is linked in arms and working on the same team no matter what. Then he thought he was doing the same thing with S.H.I.E.L.D. until it was taken over. So I just think the theme of this movie was very clear to the audience, but it did have a deeper message to really bring to the audience. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. So this movie, the conversations felt real. Everything was good in that sense. But the one thing I do want to mention is the conversations between Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes. Those were perfect. Those hit home really, really hard. They knew exactly how to make the audience feel for these characters, especially when Steve was referencing to Bucky all the different lines that they said in their friendship to get bonded stronger. And when you have references like that through dialogue, it makes the movie stronger in itself as well. So that specifically is the part that I think they nailed in dialogue. Everything else, the conversations felt real. It was fine. Nothing to really call home about. But those scenes with Bucky and Steve, those are. The fifth essential aspect is acting. So overall, I didn't hate any acting in this movie. There wasn't anyone I can single out that didn't do a good job. Everyone did at least decent. There is some that I want to shout out, like Chris Evans, who played Steve Rogers. Obviously, Captain America. He was a great Captain America, and he will always be a good Captain America. I feel like he represents the character really, really well. He knows how to play him in a sense where he's a lovable character, but he also has that deep backstory. So I feel like as a character in himself, he does a really good job. He knows how to do that well. Also, Samuel L. Jackson, who played Nick Fury. Now, we've obviously had him in many different films. I feel like he is really good in this one. He knew exactly how to have the comedic timing he needs to break up those really tough scenes to watch in this movie and add a little bit of comedy to kind of make us feel better. And he obviously is the perfect man for the job for Nick Fury, even though in the comics he doesn't always look like that, but he just is a lovable character that's nice to have on the scene as a backup. And Scarlett Johansson, who played Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, she was kind of a side character in this movie, also kind of a main character. Overall, she plays that character really well. She knows what she's doing. Even when she has to improvise, she knows what the character is supposed to be like. So I do have to give her credit. And finally, Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson. This is his first appearance in the MCU. He is now Captain America. He is going to be in Captain America, Brave New World. And I can't wait to see that movie. I'm very excited. I've missed really good MCU movies, and I'm really hopeful that this will be one of them. But either way, this is where he first appeared, and his character is awesome. I personally really like Sam Wilson as a character in these movies, and he's the perfect sidekick for Captain America, and he did it really well. I don't really know what else to say. All these guys just did the best acting in the movies. That's really what I'm trying to say. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. Now, when it came to the visuals, I think the movie looked really good. They knew how to capture the size of those helicarriers really, really well with all the objects around it, kind of comparing it in size, because it's obviously just all cinematography. There isn't actually big ass helicarriers there, but those scenes when they were showing it, when Nick Fury was showing Project Insight to Steve Rogers, they had some good depth. It looked really good. It looked real. But otherwise, the movie looked like any other really superhero movie. It looked good, but nothing crazy. When it comes to the emotions, though, the movie did a good job at the end. Throughout the movie, it was good. It was cool to see these things. Nothing really that really emotionally invested me. But because I do like the characters so much, when it came to the end of the movie, the interaction between Steve Rogers and the Winter Soldier, it got me. Now, I didn't cry this time because I have watched this movie plenty of times. However, I did still feel that same emotion that I felt the first time watching it because of how emotionally connected you get to these characters. You want the best for these characters, which is why when sad scenes like that happen, it pulls at your heartstrings. So they did a good job with the cinematography when it came to visuals in some of the scenes, and when it came to the emotions when it counted towards the end. The seventh essential aspect is editing. So this movie is 2 hours and 16 minutes long. I love it. I love that it's long. Me personally, if a movie is over 2 hours long, it has to have an engaging story with good character development and just overall a good plot. If it doesn't, it's going to get boring really quickly. So that's why comedies that put plot on the back seat, they're like an hour and a half. They're like an hour 20, hour 30, hour 40 max, because they know that the whole point is to make the audience laugh. You can't be doing that for 2 hours straight. Eventually the audience will get bored. But with The Winter Soldier, with an interesting story, with interesting characters, with a lot of depth in the theme it has, it deserves to be over 2 hours. You want to see more of it. You want it to keep going. And I think that 2 hours and 16 minutes, which is almost 2.5 hours, is a good length for a movie that has a good story like this one does. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. Now the soundtrack, it does its job. I mean, it's nothing that it's not very memorable. It's not something that I'm going to be remembering like, oh, this was the exact sound that came from Captain America the Winter Soldier. However, I do like their use specifically of a few sounds, which one is when Nick Fury was in Steve Rogers' apartment, he was playing that original 1940s sound that you hear in all of these movies referencing Captain America that references his past. It's almost like his theme song. It's not, but it's almost that way. And one more thing that they added in the soundtrack that I thought was very creative and very memorable was the sound that occurs whenever the Winter Soldier appeared is the scream that Bucky does in the first movie except I think, well, I know it's contorted, but I think it's put in reverse as well. I'm not sure. But they just sampled his scream from that movie and made that the sound cue that happens whenever the Winter Soldier shows up. And I think that's incredibly creative, and keeping it linked to that same character through all the different phases that he goes through is something that I definitely think is memorable in the soundtrack. Not necessarily music, but that sound effect in general. So I think it's the director's job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And the directors of this movie were Anthony Russo and Joe Russo, known as the Russo brothers, especially for Marvel movies. They have done so many of them, and they always do a fantastic job, which is why I'm excited for Avengers Doomsday, because they will be directing that as well. But together they have previously directed 3 movies, and they were Pieces, Welcome to Collinwood, and You, Me, and Dupree. Now, I haven't watched any of those 3 movies. However, I've seen plenty of their other movies after this movie. And trust me, this one was not a fluke. They continued on making good movies just like this one. Were they worthy of making this movie? Abso-freaking-lutely. And the 10th essential aspect is time. This movie 100% stands the test of time. It is known as one of the best Marvel movies. It's known as one of those movies that you can rewatch all the time and it will still be a good movie. So, heck yeah, it stands the test of time. It's been 11 years. It's probably going to still stand in 20 more years as well. Now, on to the reviews. So, Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 90%, Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it a 92%, and IMDb gave it a 77%. Now, I don't know why IMDb put it at a 77%. I think it deserves to be higher. It's a really good movie, so I'm just going to remove that now. However, the 92 I think is slightly too high. I think 90 is a pretty good range. Could be like 85 to 90 is somewhere where I would personally put it. Because there's barely anything I can say that's bad about this movie. Maybe some scenes here and there could be better, but nothing that's bad. There's nothing bad in this movie. Just things that could be slightly improved. Because everything can always be improved. So I think that 85 to 90 range is right where I think I'd put it. I, again, have no idea who in their right mind would put it at 77. And finally, the rankings. So, in 2014, it's going to be first above X-Men Days of Future Past. Both these movies, Marvel movies, both have very interesting stories with a lot of good character development. I just think that the theme that Captain America, the Winter Soldier has brings so much more depth to the movie than Days of Future Past even has. So that was a no-brainer for me that it deserves to be right above it. Otherwise, the movies are both really good. They're both good Marvel movies. They're both good superhero movies. They're both interesting. I think the theme is the one tiebreaker there that I saw. In the 2010s, it's going to be fourth, above X-Men Days of Future Past and below Joker. Now, I already said why it's above Days of Future Past, so I'm not going to explain that again. However, I think it's below Joker because that movie also has, it's an incredible movie, has a very interesting story. The character development is also there. And although the theme isn't as strong as Captain America, the Winter Soldier has, the acting is far superior in every way. Now, don't get me wrong, as I mentioned earlier in acting, this movie has great actors. It has great acting in it. There's scenes that I will remember until I die because of how good they are. But that Joaquin Phoenix's version of Joker, although he's not my favorite Joker per se, his acting is amazing. Now, he is the real reason why that movie works. If it was any other actor, anyone that's on the planet alive, it would not be as good. Now, that's me personally, that's what I think. But that is why that movie is above it. Literally by a smidge. Otherwise, the rest, Captain America the Winter Soldier, would be above it. But that movie just has perfect quality and even more in acting. And in all time, it's going to be ninth, again above Days of Future Past and below The Breakfast Club. Now, I'm not going to explain why it's above Days again, but I will explain why it's below The Breakfast Club. I personally think that movie, they're two sides of the same coin. They both have heavy themes when it comes to those movies. One is more action-packed, and one is more serious. Now, I think as the cinematography goes, you can relate a lot more with the characters in The Breakfast Club. They actually make you feel more for those characters because they're just people, they're just students staying in detention, and you can relate to them, and hearing all the problems they're going through makes you feel a way towards those characters. Now, Captain America, as much as I love those characters and I really sympathize with them whenever anything happens, they're just comic book characters. Now, to me, obviously, it's close. For others, it could be way further down the list. I don't know. All I know is that The Breakfast Club, the way they did it, especially since It was very original. It's from 1985. No one did that beforehand. There's been plenty since, but no one did that beforehand, and it was such a great concept and a great feel of a movie that I just could not put this one above it. That's all I have for Captain America the Winter Soldier. If you guys enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to comment what movie you want me to review next. Make sure to go check out Mr. Majoritarian. He's the one that got me into this movie reviewing. He does the same exact style with the essential aspects, the reviews, the rankings in each decade and in all time. So definitely go check him out. His link is always going to be in my description. Otherwise, I hope you guys have an amazing night. Peace out.